Hi, folks. The following is a conversation with Dr. Ross Turner. Ross has been in computer science since the early 2000s. He graduated from the University of Aberdeen with his PhD in computer science with a focus on data. He is one of the OGs, one of the godfathers of data. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Awesome. So thank you for joining me, Ross. This is Dr. Ross Turner. And I was just laughing with Ross before I hit record, because we've actually known each other 10 years and I had no idea what Ross actually does. It was just something with computers. And it's incredible that, and we're just saying how, because of AI coming to the forefront, the terminology in someone like your LinkedIn profile is starting to make sense to someone like me. So yeah, pretty good place to jump in, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. It's great to be here.
So yeah, so the first thing I want to ask you, you did your doctorate in technology back in 2005, 4-year doctorate, right? A PhD. And this was now basically in the foundations of AI, if I understand. So can you translate for us mere mortals what natural language generation entitled georeferenced data to text techniques and application means?
Yeah, sure. So just for like a background, I did pure computer science, an undergraduate degree, 2001 to 2005, and then I did a doctorate from 2005. I actually finished in 2008, but graduated 2009. Um, Actually, for artificial intelligence back then, it was a bit of an AI winter. I would say the kind of 2000s. Obviously, we had the dot-com boom. Um, there was a bit of work with neural networks and things that kind of had a lot of promise back then, and then hadn't really delivered. So it was a kind of interesting time to study, right?
Mm.
I would say. To
Crashing and
explain.
burning all around you, and you're like, I'm going to study that.
Right, exactly. But then, in the background, there was this whole kind of statistical revolution, right? Kind of in AI, right? And obviously, the big data wave hadn't quite come back then, but it was it was upon us, right? So
So
there was a
back
lot of
then, sorry
change.
to interrupt you, but did
So
you anticipate that it was going to go somewhere? Was that why you chose it? Why did you choose it?
yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I had a notion it was going to go somewhere. But like I said, it was, it'd been around a long time already, right? So you've got to remember kind of, you know, the foundations of neural networks, etc., were around in the 50s. There was a lot of investment into AI in the 60s, right? So, starting with machine translation, and then you kind of saw like 40 or 50 years later, machine translation was still a huge topic at academic conferences, right?
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of what I was actually doing was basically one half of natural language processing,
Mhm.
which you've probably heard of. So NLP, or natural language processing, is one of the subfields of AI, right? Which is all about kind of understanding and generating human language. Um, and then I specifically worked on one half of it called natural language generation. So you can kind of split natural language processing into two. One is natural language understanding, which is all about taking in linguistic information and deriving data from it, whereas the generation part is taking data, structured data in spreadsheets, databases, or other things, and producing language.
Okay,
So it's kind of
interesting.
an inverse process.
Okay, nice. It's funny. I feel like I'm treating you like ChatGPT. Like, explain it to me like I'm 12.
This is the thing, right? Now with the advent of things like ChatGPT, etc., it's much easier to explain, right? You've got a very
Sure.
kind of fixed reference point which you can point people to, and most people now have tried it out,
Yeah,
which
everyone's
is
got a working
fantastic.
model. Okay.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Whereas back then, when I was kind of studying, it was just a very esoteric thing, and you spent half of the time just explaining what it was before you could actually get down to showing things.
Sure. So that makes your job a lot easier now. Okay.
It
So
does.
and then after you finished your PhD?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, so it was a kind of interesting time. So I've been studying for a long time. We built a lot of research systems, so which had then been deployed operationally at various companies. So we've done a lot of work in weather forecasting.
Mhm.
So the automation of human written weather forecasts, right? So meteorologists, they obviously they create models of the atmosphere and do a lot of numerical prediction. But the actual the written part of it of the forecasting job is a bit more routine, if like. So we spent a lot of time automating that part. We deployed it in a few different weather services,
Did it
mostly
work?
for. It did indeed, yeah. So there was some, pretty interesting, kind of articles that came out. There was a study where we showed that for offshore. So basically, a lot of this was within the offshore oil industry,
Hmm. Yeah, because they need
and
to know what's going to happen with the weather, right?
right,
It's going to affect their
exactly.
profit.
So loading and offloading vessels onto
Hmm.
oil rigs, etc. So this kind of very kind of teletext style of weather forecasting. But we showed that the systems were actually preferred by a lot of end users simply because it was just more consistent,
Hmm.
right? In the way it talked about times and things like this. So there was a bit of a buzz um, around that. We also did quite a bit of work in healthcare. For example, we had one research project where we were looking at automating the generation of nurse shift summaries. So obviously, nurses, they're overworked as it is, but at the
Hmm.
end of each shift, they have to write up a report which can normally take them, another half an hour to an hour of the time. So we were looking at how we could help automate that process.
Fantastic.
And then, yeah,
Did that
so
work?
it did again, and we did some studies with some colleagues as well, where they showed that some clinicians under certain conditions could actually make better decisions based on textual and graphical representations of data. Right.
Brilliant.
So
And this is a while back, so it's not like automation
lab back.
just started, right? This is something that's been going on
Yeah.
for a long time. Humans
Yeah.
identifying opportunities to use technology to make things more efficient.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now I think basically it's kind of known as like augmented um, analytics, if you like, right? So it's interesting. But back then, this was mostly in the research context. But we did deploy a few systems in different industries, and that's where the kind of spark really came. But at the same time, I moved to Berlin, started working in the technology boom over here. So I actually moved over to Berlin and worked on search on map search on the map search backend for Nokia Maps. So kind
Amazing.
of a bit of a shift, but I was still working in data, natural language processing, and machine learning, and that was 2009, and when things really started to kind of take off in terms of this whole kind of statistical revolution and big data, etc.
That's really exciting. It's really exciting for me to speak to you about this stuff because you've been at it since, I don't say since the dawn of
Yeah,
time. Like, so you identified that it was going to be important, and it makes sense to someone like me, even that the data is everything. It's so valuable. It's everybody's gold. And I realized that when I ran my own agency, is that my database, when I had an agency, was my gold mine. That was where
yeah,
I could generate an income from, and that's essentially what I sold, was this data. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Nokia, and then more in terms of your journey and the evolution of your journey with AI.
yeah. So at the same time, we'd also founded a company called Data Text Limited back at the. It was basically a university spin out in Scotland. So that was 2009. At the same time as I came over to Germany, that company got acquired in 2012
Mhm.
um, and became a company called Aria NLG, and that's where I'm currently working right now. But that really focused on enterprise. level natural language generation, right? So really bringing that kind of research concept that had been kind of brewing um, for years at the university and in the research world, and they really kind of brought that to the commercial market. So that was back in um, 2012. I spent a few years, working back with that company, kind of growing that business. And then, yeah, I got itchy feet again, as I tend to do. Um, and
It's
after that, I
hard
went.
when you're somebody who can identify opportunity, right? To not like stretch out and like, oh, I can see there's something there. I got to go try that.
Yeah, yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, and I think for me, it was just there was so much going on with technology, and especially in Berlin back then, kind of the whole Silicon Valley thing had kind of really started to kind of grow up, right? And there's just a lot of opportunities. So I actually moved and worked with a company, an e-commerce company called Visual Meta GmbH, which operated 14 shopping portals around the world back then. So they were owned by Idealo, which is in turn an Axel Springer venture. But I mean, that was a lot of fun, right? Because it was kind of basically then going to e-commerce and business to consumer, right? Which is a really interesting field to work in. So I was kind of came on as a senior product manager, built up a small engineering team, and we were working in price comparison and applying natural language processing to e-commerce. So you know
How did you
a
find
world.
building up a team? How was that for you? That's you dabbling in recruitment to some extent, right?
Eh, no, I'll leave that to the professionals like you, I think. But yeah, no, it was really just kind of trying to bring a very data-driven approach to what we were doing. Actually, to be fair, Visual Meta was already kind of quite far ahead in that respect. They had a very good machine learning team as well, right? So at that point, I think being able to find people who had even studied machine learning was becoming a lot easier, right? So now I think you see machine learning and AI becoming core parts of the curriculums. Actually, I think even back then, we're talking 2015, 2016, it was
Wow.
already like that. So, um, yeah, that was really really interesting, actually.
Have a conversation about this once to do with shopping trolleys and anticipating shopping lines. Was that you and I?
It probably could have been, yes, I would
Yeah.
imagine so. Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm trying to understand the output of what you were doing there. Like what was the sort of intentional problem that this was trying to solve?
Well, so back then, they had, um, you know, it's basically a visual comparison, right, online. So they were a shopping aggregator. Um, so they were doing a lot of image processing. There's also the common problem of, you get an inventory from shops and you need to ingest that into your product catalog, right, on the website, right? So there's a lot of linguistic processing you can do around the product descriptions to be able to create your kind of shopping catalog, right? So there's a lot of automation around that. And then at the same time, kind of conversational commerce was coming in at that point as well. So there was a huge buzz 2016, when Facebook were kind of announcing, um, chatbots on the Messenger platform, right? And that kind of opened up a huge market for e-commerce. So yeah, the whole chatbot thing was coming in then as well, and it was really trying to find new ways of reaching customers, right, in a conversational manner as well.
Oh, awesome. Okay. And then so did you kind of stay with Ari at the same time or?
Well, not at that point. So I was working um, with Visual Meta, and then I was very lucky, in fact, to be offered a job um, at Boston Consulting Group Digital Ventures. And yeah, I was actually working as a data science lead there. So we're talking now, and we've launched around 2018. Um, so Boston Consulting Group Digital Ventures is the corporate venturing arm of BCG, management consultancy practice. So, that was really really exciting. Basically, helping large corporates go from 0 to 1, really. And
That's the
improve
dream, I
the
guess. That's
efficiency.
like the yes moment. It's like this is what you've been working for, right? Working towards.
Yeah. So that was a real, I think, eye opener for me, really, especially from. I think it opened my eyes up to design thinking, uh, strategic design, and really how you embed yourself, I guess, with customers, and kind of working through, okay, what's the best way to apply technology to, you know, their problems, I think.
That's so interesting. I hadn't really
Yeah.
thought about that in terms of the tools that I use, just how dependent you become on them. Like they actually become a part of the business as a result of your dependency on them. It's kind of obvious now that you've said it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it was, really opened my eyes to, mapping out the user journey,
Mhm.
kind of seeing friction points, and then rather just having a pure technical lens on everything, right? Really saying, okay, how can we best help your business, and is there a viable business model behind it, right? So this kind of convergence between um, UI, UX, and interaction design, classic kind of business, um, forecasting and technology, and then that's really what got me stuck on kind of product management, and that's where I thought, okay, I've been a techie for all these years now, but I'm really more interested in, okay, how can I fill that void between business, tech, and design? So
Interesting.
yeah, I got my start in product management really, I guess, at Visual Meta, kind of officially. That's the first time I ever had the title
Mhm.
product manager. But I think I really cut my teeth um, at BCG TV. That's what opened my eyes to a lot of things, and the
Okay.
potential of applying technology really to humanity.
Fantastic. That sounds exciting. So what came next?
God, it's a long journey, isn't it now?
It's a long journey. I mean, and we don't have all the time in the world. I know you're a
Yeah,
busy guy, so maybe just to kind of summarize rather
yeah.
than list, hey, like everything. And also I'm curious to know what had you go back to Aria, like what they're up to.
Yeah. I guess to kind of finish off the journey, I ended up, back at Area as chief product officer. Um, I got a great offer to come back to the business. Obviously, things had moved on a lot.
That must be fascinating to leave a company and come back to it. To discover like where it's still familiar and where it's so different. How long was the gap there?
Yeah. So the gap there was around 5 or 6 years, 6 years
Wow.
really.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Interesting.
yeah, I kind of came back as chief product officer. Obviously with the background of having been a co-founder originally. So that was kind of really exciting just to see how the business had grown from kind of being at the university, you know, 12 years beforehand in an attic, just with, 4 or 5 people, and then now it kind of being a global company, right? And
That's cool.
yeah, global leader according to Gartner now in the field of natural language generation. But it's also kind of fascinating to see how the market grew really, right? So natural language generation went from something that you spent forever trying to explain to people 10 years previously to being, I think 2021, 22 is about $500 million market, and now it's estimated to grow into the billions now. Um, so that was really exciting. I think then we saw another technical um, disruption, right? So there was a lot of hype. I was talking about Facebook and bringing chatbots to the Messenger platform 2016. There was some buzz 2018 around machine translation. Is it basically going to be um, achieve human parity? And then 2022 you had ChatGPT happen, right? OpenAI, et cetera. So I think I heard somebody describe it as the brother from another mother, almost, right? So kind of NOG, right? Um, which is a kind of interesting one. Certainly, it's very complementary to the type of things that we do at ARIA, right? It's, I think, inspiring, like I said before, how they've really brought AI into the hands of, the masses now, the mass consumer market. It's also very different, right? Compared to the type of things we do at ARIA, right? So we're obviously focused on, enterprise reporting, mission critical applications where, you require 100% accuracy. Um, we all know, I'm sure you yourself, you've kind of worked with ChatGPT, etc. There are shortcomings. It does make mistakes. It does this thing which is called hallucinations, where it just simply admits things that aren't quite true. Um, but there's a lot of potential in kind of merging these approaches. The 100% deterministic, accurate, mission critical type of things we do with um, the variation and I would say the mass appeal of something like a large language model.
So am I understanding correctly that you go into enterprise level companies and you basically build a chat GPT like machine for them?
Yeah, I mean that's one way of describing it. I mean we more focus on like I said, the mission critical reporting side. So periodic reporting, um, kind of automating, routine um, reporting. So, for example, one of the industries we work in is finance, right? We work on portfolio reporting for large asset management funds, bits like that. There, you really can't have any black box technology, right? ChatGPT, like, right? So
Sure. Okay,
it has
understandable.
it
It's got
has
to
to
have
be 100% because you're
theirs.
talking
Yeah, yeah.
regulatory compliance. Again, we work in industries like pharmaceuticals as well. We also, funnily enough, we have one part of the business working quick service restaurant automation, kind of store analytics, right? But so anywhere where you have structured data and there are reports being generated in natural language, right? So and you see this all over the place. Um, whereas an application like ChatGPT is more aimed at the consumer market, right? For example, there's a lot of traction with that technology. For example, helping people to write code.
Mhm.
There's
And how do
also a
you
lot of
feel
traction.
about that? What do you think about it? It's an interesting question, specifically in recruitment, because in my mind, I'm so torn because I love the fundamentals, right? I think there's a lot of value in knowing the nuts and bolts of how things actually go together. Specifically when something goes wrong, you can
Right.
understand how you got to that point. But at the same time, if the automation is so strong and so powerful and so clever, then why would you not use it? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other kind of use case for these types of large language models, as they're known, is co-authoring as well. So a lot of people who are working in the content generation space, really using it as a co-author, as a first draft, right?
Yes.
Um, I think one of the big questions that comes up a lot is will the machines take over? And my kind of response to that is no. I mean, I think you always need a human in the loop. Um, so okay, it might get you 80% there drafting, an article, but you still need that human touch.
But if it gets really good at coding, which it looks like it would, right? Then people are going to become something different instead of coders. And technologists like yourself are going to possibly turn into, as you have, focus more on product or something like that. So yeah. I'm just curious about the
Yeah,
kind of the conversation between, because you said you were techie before, you're obviously coding a lot back in the day, and
yeah,
kind of moved away from that. And that's what I'm curious about. So just think of it from a recruitment point of view. Once again, when I'm looking at a profile, when I'm looking at a CV, I'm going to be looking for different things now. Already I've started looking, trying to keep track of what sort of technologies data engineers should be adopting, like AI technologies. What are you using to make yourself better? And but there's a kind of argument around that, and not so much that humans are going to lose their jobs. It's not so much that I'm worried about at this point. It's more who's being ambitious and intentional about the opportunities and the possibilities.
yeah. I mean, it's a really good point. I think my gut feeling, not really having coded anymore, but what I hear from a lot of people in the know is that um, it can write code, but it's the same issue with trying to debug another human's code, right? If there's something wrong with it, um, it's quite challenging. So there's the obvious kind of efficiency gains you get from using a tool like that, but there's still this complexity of, okay, if it's a bug or it doesn't work or it doesn't compile or something like that, then how do I as a human then debug it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's those types of um,
Okay. Okay.
questions that still need to be answered. And then, there's certain things around, ethics as well. So, a lot of these models can code because, they've gone out to the internet and they've scraped an open code repository, right? And then, you know, they've ingested all this code without necessarily understanding the license associated
Mm-hmm.
with that
Mm-hmm.
open source code,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how permissive it is, etc. Um, so that's really going to have to shake out as well from a kind of ethical
Mm.
and
Yeah, I mean, we're right at the beginning of
regulatory.
something. As much as, people like you have been in this field for longer than most, I think. Well, certainly longer than most of the technologists that I speak to. And it's of course there's going to be some kinks to iron out along the way. So on that subject, where do you see things going? Even with Aria and yourself and technology in general, you can take it in whatever direction you want. But what you anticipated back in 2006, was it, that this is what you wanted to do, this is where you wanted to be, this is where you wanted to learn? You've picked up a lot of information. What do you think's to come?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. There's a massive amount of investment in this space, right? So this whole large language model thing that came out really, which got notoriety with ChatGPT, but to be honest, technology's been around for a while. I think what OpenAI did was, really make a compelling conversational experience, right, out of the technology, right? But you got to remember the kind of underlying or the underpinning, architecture, etc., was kind of around since, 2017, 2018. There was a
Mhm.
paper by Google on generative pre-trained transformers, right? This GPT architecture. Okay. Um, so there's been a massive amount of hype on based upon ChatGPT when it was released in 2022 into the hands of consumers. Um, I think the next few years there'll be a shakeout of there's be a lot of new companies um, who will build applications on top of this kind of foundational technology. But I think when the tide comes in, if you like, we'll kind of see who's been swimming naked. I think to quote another article I read the other day. Um, but yeah, a lot of it will shake out on regulation, data, and kind of who's got that kind of moat and competitive advantage around it, right? So, from my particular case, area where I'm working, we're an incumbent in, the natural language generation space, mission critical enterprise reporting. We have to embrace, the technology disruption that's happening. And we see a lot of value in kind of hybrid approaches to natural language generation. When I say hybrid, kind of, the kind of traditional ways that natural language generation has been done, which has often been more around, rule-based approaches, kind of deterministic, you know, reasoning, with this kind of new wave of models which have to also be controlled at the same time, right? So, we've got a white paper out there, talking about how we approach this. Um, so it's really about how can we best harness the technology disruption that we have in a safe and secure way, right? And there's a lot of other things around. Okay, is there going to be a huge proliferation of fake news with this new technology, etc.? I mean, I think the main point is that fake news has always been around, right? You can argue now, okay, the technology's got even better that you can scale it up, but I think um, the regulation will come, um, and in due course. But what we will see, hopefully, I hope to see in the next few years, we'll see, huge strides in AI applications. Obviously, there's going to be the budgets for it now, from large corporates, and we'll see, hopefully, another golden age of technology innovation.
Yeah, it's so amazing. It's just so exciting. I got approached by a company who asked me to be their first guinea pig, and they managed to integrate with my applicant tracking system. And I jumped into my applicant tracking system this morning, and I asked them to set to basically dig back into the data from 10 days ago. Don't start today, start from 10 days ago, so that I can see in terms of the applications that I've got how this thing works. And as soon as I looked at it, and this is how you know when an AI application is something that's going to be sticky and you're actually going to take it on, it's not just going to fall away. Immediate impact. I was like, my God, it can do that for me. It can do that in this really clear, concise way. I'm immediately faster. I'm immediately better at my job because of having this thing do this stuff for me. So yeah, more of that would be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that's the main thing. If we come back to that question we were talking about, will the AI take over or whatever? Again, I don't see it that way. I see really the ability to, automate the mundane, the routine tasks, and kind of free up, people who are working in, knowledge work onto those more higher value adding tasks, right? And I think there's going to be a little bit of a transition. Um, Certainly now people are better trained, they're better educated. You see now in kind of university programs, people are doing masters in AI, and you have people with a number of years experience, postgraduate, working with these types of models. And I think there's a lot more, um, how would I say it? There's a lot more information out there, better training, a lot better understanding around the ethical parts of this as well, right? To do with AI, this whole um, realization of bias and data, the training data, the underlying data distribution can shift, right? The need to kind of make sure that models are kept up to date, and I think people, from a technical perspective, understand how to do this better, and understand the repercussions of these things as well much better.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to change the channel completely and ask you something that I'm genuinely curious about.
Go
I
for it.
was thinking about it this morning. What can I ask Ross that he's not going to be expecting? You have been into martial arts for even longer than you've been into computer science, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
curious because
that's
my heroes are, the usual suspects: Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman,
mm.
Elon Musk, and so on. And they're all into jujitsu. And I'm just wondering, what's that about? Like, where's the whole technology martial arts link? Like, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a good point, right? Yeah, I think um for a lot of people working in technology, I mean, you're sitting all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need an outlet to kind of um get away from that kind of very um, sedentary, I think that's the right word, sedentary lifestyle. And so a lot of people are kind of turning towards that. But I think there's,
But
for
why
martial
that?
arts,
You know, you could go, I mean, there's other things you could get. There's a theme there, you know, there's a
yeah,
pattern.
well, yeah, exactly. But I think there's kind of, I mean, the main thing for me personally is it kind of keeps you humble, right? And
Ah,
you're always learning.
interesting.
Um, and if I think about technology, you're always learning, right? Because it's so fast moving.
Ah, I get it
Uh,
now. It's the love of the challenge, the love of solving a problem in engineers. You know, people who have the knack when it comes to engineering and wanting to understand the world and hack things and solve problems. Am I onto something with that?
I think so. I mean, there's the whole kind of Kaizen part of it,
What's
for
Kaizen?
sure. So this kind of just feeling of practice, constant practice and constant improvement, right? And yeah, so that's there. And I think, coding, because there's a new technology and a new framework every,
Day.
you know, every that's right, exactly. Um, martial arts, I mean, for me, just evolves as well. And a lot of the time you're kind of, regurgitating um, old things as well, old practices, right? I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now is not just for tech people, right? I mean, obviously, the whole
No, for sure, for
Mark,
sure.
Mark, Mark Zuckerberg thing is like, again, put it in the limelight a little bit, right? But yeah, I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for me, the nice thing about it is it's a little bit more gentler as well as you get older, if
Yeah.
I'm honest.
You don't want to hurt
But
yourself now.
it, well, that's it. I mean, I started off with like Thai boxing. I'm still doing a bit of judo, but judo is quite hard on the body. But I mean, again, judo is, for everybody of all ages. But Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a little bit gentler on the body, maybe you could argue, as you get a bit older. And obviously, it kind of rose to fame in the early days of the UFC, etc., etc. But now, kind of, most mixed martial artists at least will know about BJJ. You've probably got a reasonable grade in the art as well. So again, things need to kind of evolve. And then if you apply that to, you know, your life as a software engineer or technologist, you have to constantly evolve as well, I think.
I like that.
Um,
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
yeah.
I was curious. So I know you've got a lot to get on with today. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. It's been really, really interesting. And I'm sure anybody watching and listening is going to learn a lot as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.